Welcome to the CANA Connection Podcast. On this special esports edition of the CANA Connection, our host, Rob Cranston, and guest host, Jack Murray, will be talking with our guest, Christopher Scroggins of EDGE. EDGE stands for Esports Development and Growth Enterprise. He is an educator and expert in developing learning programs for academics and collegiate instances of esports and how to grow that throughout the industry. So without further ado, let's hop into the show.
Here, and we have a special guest with us, and who has been a leader over the last several years, Chris Scroggins, in the esports industry. Excited to have you here, Chris. Jack and Co and I will go through some discussion points, and let's start with you, of course, and your platform and where you've been to get to where you are in esports.
Yeah, sure, Rob. Thanks for having me, y'all. I mean, this is such an exciting opportunity. Again, anytime I get a chance to talk about scholastic esports, it's amazing. And talking with people that are knowledgeable and passionate is always great. And so, first and foremost, thanks for having me. But yeah, so my journey into esports is, I don't know if there's a normal one, right? Like, how do you get into an industry that is emerging? And so, I started as a competitive gamer back in high school. Loved Call of Duty, and my buddies and I, when we were in high school, started a team, and at our peak, we're 7th in North America on the duos ladder on MLG and game battles, and then we're top 32 in the country for our team ladder. And so that provided us with a ton of opportunity to play against people that are CEOs in the space now of teams, and still competing to this day in the CDL, right? And because MLG Game Battles was the only place to really compete back then. I mean, I'm aging myself, but this is pre-Twitch. We were watching stuff on MLG.TV and all these other platforms trying to piece it together. And so hung that up to go to college because outside of a few affiliate codes and discounts off Sprite and other things like that, wasn't exactly going to have a career in esports, right? And so went off to college, got my undergrad in kinesiology, exercise science, and fell in love with management, and decided to pursue my master's and then eventually my PhD in sport management. So during my PhD, one of the professors in the program went and traveled to a conference, and he said, "Hey, can you show a video for me?" So I showed up to his class, pressed play on the video, and then there is, currently now the CEO of 100 Thieves, Nate Shot, Matt, and I was like, whoa, I remember that name. That was like one of the top guys when I competed. And so we were just started talking about my experience, and I left that class like really fired up again, and I had no idea we had an esports elective at the University of South Carolina. Fast forward to the next day, the director of the program comes in and he says, "Who are you?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, You're like this closeted ex-pro gamer or something. Like the students they can't stop talking about it in the halls." And so he said, "We want you to redevelop our course. Let's freshen this curriculum up and let's make this really impactful." And so that's where I really got my start in esports and academia. I stumbled upon it as a TA during my PhD. And so fast forward to year 2 of my PhD, Dr. Joey Gariziak at Shenandoah University heard my research at a research conference at UCI. He reached out and said, "Hey, we would love for you to apply for this position." There was a ton of interest in this position, so I was just really fortunate that it ended up working out. And after my second year of my doc program, went to Shenandoah, helped co-develop about 22 esports specific courses. That was, the first program with an academic major, a varsity competitive team, and a dedicated esports arena. And through that process, founded EDGE, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but EDGE is Esports Development and Growth Enterprise, where we help launch scholastic esports programs all around the world, really, which we've been really fortunate to do. And so I know that was long-winded, but again, it provides context as to my background in academia. And so, not exactly traditional into esports, but I don't think that exists.
That's awesome. The background in the scholastic part of your journey, and scholastic part being not just the student side, but also now as an adjunct professor. How did you come up with the 22? I'm just curious because this is like the 22 courses, right? Like it's new. Everybody's like, oh, how did you know that was the demand pull really from student body population and interest, right?
Right. Rob, I think that's $1 billion question, honestly, because as I reflect on it, it's like, yeah, we just kind of figured it out, and I think my background in sport management, and being a gamer, right, endemic to the industry, really helped me understand what they needed to know, but what learners wanted to know. Because I used to share an office with an economist and a professor that taught finance, and I knew that students needed that information, but they didn't want to hear that information necessarily, right? Not in the traditional classroom sense, and so navigating through what the learners in sport management loved and knowing what they needed to know in the industry of esports, I started developing courses that would give them the foundation to know about the esports industry, but then the upper level courses really provided them with transferable skills that they could take outside of esports and work in management in any discipline, right? Because the thing I told my dissertation committee and I tell parents when they're afraid of their child majoring in esports is we'd be doing them a disservice just preparing them for esports. And so those foundational courses are really where we catch them up to speed. But then I took and borrowed from, psychology, finance, econ, business administration, management courses for those upper level courses to really make them impactful for the learner so that, yes, we're teaching through esports specific examples, but they're learning things way bigger and outside of the world of esports.
Oh, geez, that's awesome. I really, truly is an evolution now that has that framework you just talked through, Chris. Do you see there being in the academic environment, a consistency of those classes now being offered across the country?
Yeah, yeah. So right now we're seeing typically esport management majors, right? Because again, they parallel sport management majors, and so they're kind of the easiest to prop up. We are starting to see some unique esports offerings. We've had people within law reach out because esports contract law has some nuances and they need to be prepared for that. You're working with sometimes a 14-year-old that's being signed to an academy team and really how do you navigate that in contract law? And then on the corporate side, some orgs they're fairly unique in structure. And so but currently we're starting to see esports management was that foundation for the discipline. We're starting to see a lot more entertainment being incorporated because as much as we love LAN events and we want to get there, we still see, that community for esports residing online. So that broadcast and production piece is so pivotal. So management, broadcast, and now we're starting to see some specializations within esports as the discipline evolves. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Oh, it does. And I think those are the disciplines, well, the tracks that now become a little bit more broader, perhaps for those you're going to attract again a whole new generation of students that can take advantage of that, and they can use that in different, like you said, Chris. It's so interesting, and that is such a great point, and especially for our audience out there that know the translation of being able to take aptitude of different types of disciplines, and those can be applied whether it's in esports or not.
Right. And Rob, what we do when we start building majors and minor certificates, whatever that might be with institutions, is we think about the transferability, right? So if we're working with a 2-year school, how can we build their core to then transfer to a 4-year institution that has some sort of esports or management offering? And then even past that, at a 4-year institution, how can we prepare them to be I don't want to call them esports generalists because that sounds like it undermines the knowledge in which they gain through that 4-year curriculum. How can we provide a curriculum that either they can go into an entry level position in the industry or now take that and go to that next level and get a master's degree or a terminal degree and really hone those skills, right? And so not only, applying all those different disciplines, but thinking about how they transfer from institution to institution and discipline to discipline.
That's fantastic. And Chris, you tied CANA into that. So from that end of fourth year or that graduate school end of that sixth, seventh, maybe eighth year, depending, right? That trajectory. We pick up as industry going, okay, hey, in our intelligent analytics and recruitment platform that we're building to, all of those components of those skill sets they have can apply and build into our business planning. which is pretty awesome. And then so we love it. And so let me transition though to the great Jack Murray here, and he's going to ask really the real technical questions. So Jack, over to you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and thanks, Chris, for joining today, taking the time to view this. Great conversation so far, and well, I know that the main conversation here has been scholastic esports, but funny enough, we know that education about esports and within esports is a huge barrier in itself currently. So with your work with Ed and Shenandoah University and just your knowledge of the industry throughout your journey, in what ways can more maybe data and data analytics help support the effort to increase and enhance education on things?
Yeah. Broke up a little bit there, but I think the question was, how can data enhance scholastic esports, right? Which is, Jack, I was hoping you weren't going to ask questions that were going to stump me. But this is a really excellent question, and so I kind of have a cheat sheet here that I've scribbled just down some thoughts. But I think that the biggest things that we see in scholastic esports initially, right? There's layers to this, but data up front can really help us tackle those populations that still might not see the benefit of esports, right? And so typically when we're working with a client or I'm talking with a student, those are going to be parents and administration. And so collecting data for parents that outlines the benefits, right? The employability of their learner as they go into the workforce. I think that's a word. And then from an administrator's side, how does this affect the bottom line? Like, not to turn the scholastic space into a business, but the institution needs to stay open, right? And so how does that learner coming in for esports transfer to the institutional bottom line, working with the VP of finance or whatever that looks like, to get that data? And a lot of programs aren't tracking that, right? Recruitment, enrollment, retention, graduation rates, employment rates. Those are the things that could really help bolster the scholastic esports space. And we're working at Edge with some of our partners to really form partnerships so we can track that data, and we can do it in a way that is impactful for the space. Because again, no one really thinks about that when they're launching a program because it's so new. They're like, let's get this off the ground and running, but they don't think about the data collection from the start. And y'all know data is invaluable. And so, that kind of data, and then overall industry insights, honestly, would help in the classroom setting. Right now, we only have a few companies that are providing kind of 10,000-foot overviews of what the space looks like, right? We all see the financial projections and the growth, and this is how many gamers there are. And there's a ton of curriculum being developed just off of those few stats, right? And so if we could have more industry insights, which I know is difficult because a lot of the industry is privatized, they want to hold on to that data. But if industry insights, enrollment, recruitment, retention data for administration, and then the benefits for parents, and then really, as we continue to scale, the well-being and mental health numbers, right? We need to continuously engage with our learners about well-being and mental health, because for some of them, this is the first time they're on that main stage. They're typically playing alone in their rooms. And so data to continuously make sure that we're checking on our learners both in and out of the classroom is pivotal for the continued growth of scholastic esports.
You answered that perfectly, and I love that you mentioned that. You mentioned some of the different types of data, like graduation date, enrollment data, graduation data, everything like that. Is there a specific type of data that maybe doesn't get highlighted the most, but you believe is the most important in supporting the growth and buy-in from these other colleges that may not have these programs yet, or all these teams yet? A specific type of data that you think is most important in helping that?
Yeah, I think enrollment data is key, right? When you talk with a potential client or an administrator of another institution, their first question is, what are the enrollment numbers we can expect? Because again, they want to launch a program that's going to benefit the most amount of learners, right? And so, although there's some small programs that have a huge impact, they would rather reach more learners through that passion, right? And so they're going to want to know enrollment, but then also that graduation rate and retention. Academia knows that come 2025, there's going to be an enrollment cliff, is what they're calling it, right? And so how can we get students and how can we keep them and really reach them through their passions, as I'm saying? And so we typically see administration really looking for those enrollment numbers, but then how many of those students stay, and can we graduate them with a meaningful experience to then go out and get a job in the industry?
Yeah, and it's interesting that as we talk about collegiate esports mainly here, and scholastic esports with the graduation rate data, we're not mentioning that, not really focused on gameplay data at all. It's because most of the esports players we see are usually recruited before they get to college to go play professionally. Collegiate esports can help these get careers in esports or find a job that also has transferable skills, like we talked about earlier. So, other than education on esports and specific data, with your experience again at Edge, what is a major barrier other than those two that are facing these scholastic programs or companies or brands trying to get into esports, trying to insert themselves in?
Yeah, Jack, that's such a great question, right? And so typically we see programs that get off the ground and they're doing excellent, right? So, okay, administration has prioritized this, esports is hot, let's get this up and running. However, what we see in the space is programs neglecting to create a foundation of sustainability, right? And so, meaning, okay, we just dedicated a ton of resources to this up front. We have a great recruitment class. We have faculty, staff. But what does year 3 look like? What does year 5 look like? How are you going to continue to plan to recruit students as more programs are launching? How are you going to continue to support this program through resources, whether that be scaling faculty and staff or providing an operational budget that can scale with enrollees, right? Again, you don't want to throw money at something, but if it's justified, how can we continue to help support and bolster and grow that program? And then really, how do we continue to innovate? Because esports in scholastic space is fine right now. It's new enough. But what happens when it's like sport management and a majority of institutions have that major? How are you going to continue to innovate? And I think that's what, my time at Shenandoah was really valuable in that Dr. Joey Gariziak, who's still their director, has done a great job at continuously providing experiential learning opportunities to those learners. And so that's where learners go who want to travel the world, who want to go work a Halo land, that's the way that Shenandoah has been able to innovate, is continuously create those industry partners that allow them to travel and give those learners those experiences. But we often, when we talk to clients, we don't see that foresight to say, in year 5, we want to do this. And so we actually have started adding that to our services of, hey, let's help you plan. Let's provide a 5-year timeline out of day 1 so that you have a checklist so that you know exactly what you should be doing. Again, they can add and subtract things from that to best fit their institution, but let's get you this timeline so that you can stay on track and continue to be forward thinking and not just be okay with launching esports, right?
Yeah, Chris, let me pull that thread. So let me get back to innovation, and that's a place and space for a lot. And I say innovation incubators, innovation, just platforms. So define esports innovation, and I know this is creativity. You were defining it. I heard you say as a partnership, relationship with industry that allows then those students to get involved in whatever that company's innovation incubator might be. But truly, what is that innovation incubation in esports?
Wow, that is a crazy question. What is the innovation incubation within esports? That is so hard to answer, Rob, honestly, and because esports is ever changing, right? I don't know if there's just one thing. I think that the trend I see, I'm going to try to answer this to the best of my ability. I think that what I've seen out of programs that do great is that they remain nimble, right? And that they put together an advisory board of industry professionals who are constantly giving them feedback, and that they have the autonomy within their institution to adjust to that feedback on the fly. And that's really that. And so maybe that's the incubation for innovation within scholastic esports, right? Is that being able to have the autonomy, and oftentimes there's a lot of bureaucracy within education. It's a very rigid system, right? And that's just because there's levels to it. but the institutions that we see are able to thrive have that kind of autonomy. Like, for example, I keep going back to Shenandoah Esports, but they are housed out of the business school. Even the competitive team is considered to be just in the esports department out of the business school. And the dean did a really great job at just letting the program grow, right? Like, you know what's best for your program. We'll continue to support, of course, within reason, but it allowed us to really adapt on the fly. And so, I think another program that's great is Boise State. Doc Haskell is doing a great job out at Boise, and that's because he continues to keep the program on the cutting edge of best broadcast practices, right? And so that's another specific thing where Joey at Shenandoah is doing great with industry connections. Doc Haskell's doing great with broadcast production and the best practices within that. And so both of them are able to really, rapidly provide change for their learners that are going to benefit them as they're progressing through their education.
That is great. Hey, that is exactly what I was looking for, because so I'm catching that, right? The reception of that, Chris, from us at CANA is that we're operationalizing and executing that innovation, and we're putting money into that that R&D, right? That OpEx that says, let's build that app. And I think that's the connection, hopefully, as we move forward, of bridging the gap between the two, of industry, right, and where we are with academics, so that, you, Chris, and putting the professor hat on, is that, hey, you're getting that inputs back into your curriculum development.
Right.
And that's cool, man. That's good stuff. But I just, so what, like for you, like what, as you, and this is I think we mentioned this, right? You're co-editing the first comprehensive esports textbook, and that's ongoing, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah.
So within that, like, what is the future? Well, first of all, is there a section on esports future, or however that's categorized? And, what adoptions to the industry need to be made? Is that part of the book?
Yeah, Rob. I mean, so the last chapter is the future of esports, right? And that's honestly why it's taking so long, because you get a few weeks behind, and next thing you know, you're rewriting an entire chapter. My players chapter has been revised and edited and updated probably 10 times, and it's not on the market yet, right? And so that is certainly part of it. That's the last chapter, so that the learner can finish reading the book and say, well, this is what comes next. But that provides a lot of challenges, because, again, keeping that up to date and really having the most relevant stuff within that can be difficult. But that's certainly in the book. I think the future of esports looks really interesting, and I have, my life day to day is in the scholastic space. I have some friends in the professional realm and can lend some knowledge to that, but I think the scholastic space looks really, really bright in the future.
That's not just optimistic. I think that the excitement behind how the formulation of early entry academics goes into, again, the future of so many different parts of the industry that again, and I think that's for students to understand how that trajectory works. Let me ask you about mentorship. From a mentorship to the students and then mentorship to industry, do you have a consortium that's kind of put together that helps work through some of the problem statements?
Yeah. So, I'm really, again, fortunate that we put together an advisory board in my time at Shenandoah, and have leaned on a lot of those people, right? But as I've started to move away from that program and rely on Edge, we do have business advisors that we lean on, but we also try to provide that mentorship for the learners as well, right? And so in my time as a professor, I advised over 30 students, and I worked with our MBA capstone students and met with probably 5 to 7 students on a weekly basis outside of any course, because they just wanted to know they were on the right track, right? Because that mentorship piece is so important, because esports can feel really daunting because you can't Google search a lot of things about it yet. There's not, as you're saying, informed decisions based on data, right? And that's why y'all are so important, because you are going to be able to provide those solutions possibly for learners. And so mentorship is so important. I spend a lot of my time within the academic space mentoring individuals. I meet with students from other institutions quite frequently just to talk esports with them. But also, we're looking to do that through Edge, put together a community of practice, right? Where our learners, no matter what institution we're at, because we hope to continue to build programs around the country, around the world, is they have a network that they immediately plug into to be able to go ask for help, to be able to find an externship or an internship. And so we're looking to do that. And we have a database that we started forming of current academics within esports and directors, but we also want to start doing that with industry as well.
Oh, hey, count us in, man. I mean, I love it. That is such a beautiful place for, a company like ours, but also within what you're developing and helping hone in on and homogenizing a lot of these different types of what are becoming policies. You said it on the business side.
Mm-hmm.
We've had this discussion with other experts in the esports community, Chris, and it's and on some of I know in some of your social media posts and just in the field of expertise is this underrepresented population in esports. And what we have honed in on is really this world of women in esports and professionals and this design of, hey, how do you get them to the next level? But that's not just demographic. Let me throw it back over to you, Chris. When you say that, when you're talking about that expertise, and who is the underrepresented population in esports?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're currently developing a K-12 curriculum with some of our partners, and that curriculum targets what we would call underrepresented populations within the space, right? And I think that they would put it in some of the populations you just talked about, women, and individuals of color, really, right? And there's cultural reasons for that. There's societal issues for that, right? Which is really hard when you're looking at something on a societal level or a cultural level. Looking at the history of esports, and we talk about this in my contemporary issues of esports class. Women. Esports up until now, one, has been extremely toxic towards that population, or just gaming, not even esports. And so we're starting to see a cultural shift with great companies like the Gamers and other companies that are really targeting for better conditions for especially women. But also up until now, societally, women have really steered clear for the most part of esports related titles, right? If you look at data, they're playing on mobile devices and they're playing really puzzle games, strategy games. It's really PvE a lot of times rather than PvP. But we're starting to see a switch in that. And so I think that we'll see more women start competing, one, as conditions for them get better within the space, but as it becomes a societal norm for women to play esports related titles and to pick up video gaming on a PC, right? Because a lot of these titles are played on the main stage on PC. But then within our class as well, we talk about individuals of color and from other just countries as well, right? So different races, ethnicities, and historically they've been mostly on console, which really limits the capability as well. But we are starting to see, I think one of the most diverse genres within esports right now is the fighting game community. And the fighting game community is a beautiful thing because it's going to inherently be less toxic because it's face to face most of the time. It's on LAN. So there's less anonymity within the interaction. But also you can play a fighting game on console, right? And so it really lowers the barrier of entry for anyone, whether you're from a different country, from a different background, you grew up playing Xbox, and you don't really have to make that transition over to PC, right? Because a lot of those games are on controller. And so I think we're starting to see a societal shift in that now the norm is people playing these competitive titles, whether it be individuals of color or women. And so I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see a shift within esports on the main stage and see a lot more diversity, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And I think you're normalizing what is the shift in a way of identifying those type of populations into, hey, they're gamers. It's not women, it's their gamers. It's that
Right.
professional profile, right?
Right, right, and you nailed it. And that's what a lot of my students, because I always give them a project. How do we pick an underrepresented population? How do we introduce them, or introduce events, or have the esports be more inclusive for them? And I think that's the underlying tone of all the projects, whether the learners know it or not, is removing that qualifier from the identity of gamer, right? We are all gamers, and gaming really transcends cultures. I've met people from South Korea, and there's a language barrier, but we talk about StarCraft 2 through a translator or something, and all of a sudden we have something in common, even though we're from across the world, right? And so we're gamers at heart, and so removing those qualifiers or identifiers before that and identifying as gamers will really open up a lot of avenues for these individuals.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. And that is Chris Scroggins, everybody. And those gamers out there, those professionals out there, those students out there that are going to listen to this, Chris, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can really reach me if you go to edgeconsulting.gg, fill out the contact form, come straight to me. You can also, find me on Shenandoah's website, but also on Discord. So reach out via email. I don't prefer email. I'm a gamer, so Discord works really well. But fill out the contact form on the website, and that'll come to me, and then we can really take the conversation from there. And so whether that's Discord, text, continuing that email chain, love to talk esports. As you can tell, I haven't been quiet for the last 35 minutes. I'm super passionate about the space, and just anyone that wants to learn more. My goal is to create informed individuals within the space that can go out and become advocates for the benefits of esports. So open to any conversation. I just appreciate y'all having me here today.
We love people passionate about things that they're involved in, especially when it involves stuff that we're involved in. So that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hey,
yeah.
Cody, do you have any questions? I'm sorry. Do you have a couple questions?
I think I think that you guys covered all my questions. I think it was great. So something you mentioned, all your education talk about, how you're prepping the students through their curriculum and everything like that to transition into esports, and then maybe take that beyond on how that can fraction out, because a lot of our previous guests have gone the opposite direction. They had to make the transition, like our generation and the current generation people, they're having to make that transition from other traditional medias into esports. By design, they've, like some of the Rebeccas we've talked to, they've all made the transition from one realm into the esports realm. And then in the future, it's going to be the opposite, right? People are going to have to transition out of the esports realm into other places. So that's just great. So you covered all that. That was all my questions were going to be about that kind of stuff. So
I do. That was awesome. Hey,
a big thanks goes out to Christopher Scroggins for joining us for this esports edition of the CANA Connection podcast. You can find additional episodes of the CANA Connection on your favorite podcast platforms, on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor.fm, and on our website at CANALLC.com. If you would like to learn more about CANA LLC, head on over to our website. And while you're there, consider signing up for our newsletter. That's all for now. This is Koa Beam signing off for Rob Cranston, Jack Murray, and the rest of the CANA Connection podcast crew, reminding you to analyze, assess, and execute. And we'll catch you next time.